Hi, my name's Bob Greenyer, and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. In this part 4 of Natural Plasma Balls and Low-Energy Nuclear Reactions, Fireball Phenomena in Hessdalen, Norway, I'm going to give some discussions and conclusions. An Italian expert study of mostly non-lightning related long-lived luminescent objects in the atmosphere above Hessdalen Valley in Norway appears to show production of a mildly active sample containing a physical structure similar to those observed in LENR research. Specifically, in the powder deduced to have come from previous light sphere events, increased radioactivity is attributed to detected zirconium, which is an element that appears to have been synthesized in two different claimed LENR systems in the Echo fuel processor of Suhas-Ralkar and in Lion reactors. In the case of the latter, consecutive experiments yielded production of zirconium uniquely in pieces that appear to have been ejected from electromagnetic structures formed during the experiment. Both 93 zirconium and 96 zirconium are beta emitters, but the former has a half-life of 1.53 times 10 to the 6 years, and the latter 2 times 10 to the 19 years. Whilst naturally occurring zirconium has only trace 93 zirconium and 96 zirconium is 2.8%, the double beta emission rate for 96 zirconium is vanishingly small. That's because this length of time is longer than the life of the universe, and this is actually not so much years, comparatively speaking. And so the radioactivity would, in theory, come mostly from the trace 93 zirconium, unless there is a feature inherent to the kind of residual effects of a ball lightning going into the ground, and it kind of fragments, but the active agent, potentially the EVOs, the fractal structures in there are dissipating into the ground, but they don't go away immediately, and they're continuing to act, and they accelerate the decay rate. And here's a suggestion where a double beta decay can have no neutrinos, so neutrinoless double beta decay from singlet neutrinos in extra dimensions. So you can go and have a look at that in your own time. So the existence of trace 93 zirconium in natural zirconium may be due to it being synthesized on an ongoing basis at a very low rate, and not just present in the last of the primordially produced nuclei. So what I'm saying is that these elements that are trace in nature, are they trace because they are the last remaining parts that were produced when the universe was born? Or is there some level of continuing production of these elements at a very low level that represents what the trace are? So one example where you know that there's continuing production, or we're led to believe there is continuing production, is that of carbon-14. So there's various processes for synthesizing carbon-14, and that's where you get radiocarbon dating. So maybe there are other processes that help contribute to the production of these trace elements, and maybe this ball lightning is one of them. The high concentrations of niobium in Echo fuel sample may be the result of rapid decay of synthesized 93 zirconium to 93 niobium, which is the only isotope of niobium found in nature. In the cavitation LENR process devised by Suhas-Ralkar, for this to happen, there would need to be a significant amount of 93 zirconium synthesized. Looking at the isotopic ratio of the zirconium-rich and Tadpole from Lion 2 by Sims, for example, may help provide a clearer answer, since it is possible that 93 niobium is produced by stepped synthesis from proton fusion as follows. So you start with 90 zirconium, add a proton, goes to 91 niobium, decays to 91 zirconium. 91 zirconium plus proton goes to 92 niobium, decays to 92 zirconium, and 92 zirconium plus a proton goes to 93 niobium. So what I'm suggesting here is the isotopic concentration of zirconium in both Echo and Lion should be investigated for unusually high levels of 93 zirconium, and Echo part process fuel should be investigated for the presence of 92 niobium, which has a long half-life but is not natural, to help establish reaction pathways. So fortunately 93 zirconium is only trace. So as we point up here, it's got 10 to the 6 year decay. So if it doesn't come across as trace isotopically, but it's quite high, then one reaction path is then got some some justification for that actually being the way things occur. If, however, there is a lot of 92 niobium in the echo part processed fuel, then that would suggest that it's this kind of proton addition path that is going on, leading to the high concentrations of 93 niobium. And I'm just going to go to the question mark over a Tadpole blog here. You'll see what I'm talking about. This is the non-magnetically extracted material from the Lion, one of the Lion reactors, Lion 2, and there are these structures which we call a question mark over a Tadpole. So this is the question mark, and the Tadpole is here. So we'll zoom into those. Okay, and you can see here in this we have 3.3%. Maybe you can see if I zoom in a little bit further, 3.3% zirconium, and in this part up here, this part has 9.5% zirconium. The other interesting thing about this structure is it has this spiral substructure on it, which is curious in its own right. Anyway, so what I'm suggesting here is if we look at this and we find that the zirconium in here has a lot of 93 zirconium when it should only have trace, then we know one reaction path. If we look at the echo fuel here, and you can see in the echo fuel that there is 3.6 niobium, 9.1% zirconium. Over here, 3.3% by weight, and niobium, 7.9% zirconium. So the zirconium concentration is always leading the niobium. So here we go, 7.6% zirconium, 2.9% niobium. So it does suggest that there's synthesis of zirconium, and then that is leading to synthesis of niobium. But which is the particular reaction path, we don't know, but by analysing these samples, we might be able to get a clearer answer. It must be noted that whilst zirconium-containing powder targeted in the Hessdalen study came from different events to those where fireball spectra were obtained, there was no zirconium spectrum observed in the fireball. This could suggest that the zirconium was synthesized when a fireball interacted the ground. And I discussed this above. Essentially, when they're looking at the ball, they don't see zirconium spectra coming out of it in the light, but they find it where it would appear that one has hit the ground, and I've described how the zirconium may be synthesized from minerals that are in the ground. Other than the zirconium hypothesis, observation of uncorroded iron-rich spheres in the target sample, according to the analyst, are unusual in nature. Is something observed in other atmospheric events, such as during the formation of crop circles, which have also been associated with ball lightning, and the Tunguska event. Suggestions that the latter was due to extraterrestrial body, that is the Tunguska event, causing an airburst followed by fragmentation, are disputed by this author, as despite many decades of research and survey, no one has found reliable evidence of an impacting body. So they have suggested maybe there's this lake nearby, but that has been found to not be the case. The nickel and ferrite spheres found in resin of trees at the location of the Tunguska event, they were deduced to be from the time, but they do not prove the fragmentation of a meteorite, since these can also be produced in Lena experiments. This author agrees with the Italian researchers that copper and quartz in the Hessdalen Valley may play a role in the production of the phenomenon. Specifically, this author suggests that the piezoelectric effect, caused for instance by day-night thermal cycles or physical deformation due to freeze-thaw, may produce a small exotic vacuum object production that charge the conductive copper deposits, since EVOs seem to want to reside in the most conductive element available. So what I'm saying is here, if you can imagine your Bic lighter, your cigarette lighter, which uses a piezo ignition, basically it builds up some tension, and then that gets smacked onto a quartz crystal, and that emits, or another piezo material, and that emits a spark. And essentially what I'm suggesting is that maybe if it's quite a northern latitude, and you have changes in temperature, day-night changes, and also summer-winter changes. As you know, when water freezes, it gets bigger, and as it turns back to water, it gets smaller, and this causes pressure cycles on the rock, and I'm saying that this may cause some piezoelectric effects, which then are creating exotic vacuum objects, and these go into the copper deposits, it being an extremely conductive element, and they build up and they build up and they build up until there is a discharge event. So I'm saying perhaps the copper sits on an insulating geological feature, so the EVOs can build and build until there is sufficient potential between areas in the ground that a sudden discharge event occurs, resulting in fireballs. It is also possible that there is a high flux of magnetically influenced cosmic particles or other incident radiation at these latitudes contributing to the phenomena. Indeed, in 2007, Bardot, Loshak and Farg observed tracks on emulsions similar to strange radiation tracks observed in Lena research. This one here is a paper, and this is talking about some unusual radiation being found at the North Pole. And this study done at the North Pole found what they see as magnetic monopoles coming down and producing these tracks, which they claim are similar to strange radiation tracks, or it's been suggested that they are similar to strange radiation tracks. Since this author considers strange radiation to also be exotic vacuum objects, it is suggested that some reclustering occurs in suitable geology, leading or contributing to the effect. The reasoning for this will become clear in a future evidence-based blog looking at EVO life cycles. So if this Bardot, Loshak and Farg work is actually seeing cosmogenic strange radiation coming in to those northern climes and following the field lines of the Earth's magnetic field, and it's going and getting stored in that copper, or there's geological structures or tectonic structures, piezoelectric effects, building all these various exotic vacuum objects. Maybe they are building up in those rocks in that area, and there are periodic discharges that lead to the fireballs. At this point, I just want to say that in 1993, there was a schematic for a ball lightning generator published. Now, it should be noted that Nikola Tesla was claimed to have been able to produce ball lightning at will. In the late 1970s, the Canadian John Hutchison observed strange effects on metals whilst replicating some of Tesla's experiments. During his Tesla-inspired research, John Hutchison had created a device he called the ball lightning projector. Included in this disclosure was the type of Tesla coils and Van de Graaff generators he preferred, and the ball lightning generating circuit. This was published in the Electric Spacecraft journal in 1993. And John sent these slides over to me, and here we have a Tesla coil, arrangement. He actually, on other pages in this journal article, there are more details about the type of Tesla coils that he preferred. Here is the sort of main circuit here, and this is the actual discharge gap and this kind of tube here, and he has these corona rings which are sort of effectively charging the corona rings by using this Van de Graaff generator here. Anyway, you can have a look at this in your own time. I thought what was interesting here, if I zoom in and take a little bit of a closer look, is that on the sort of broader overview of the equipment, he has these 12-inch diameter copper ballast balls. And on here, he has these next to the tungsten electrodes, which are where the discharge gap is. He has also these 4-inch diameter solid copper balls. So copper seems to play a role in this equipment, whether that's deliberate. I think it probably is. And this is interesting because obviously in Hessdalen you have these copper deposits, and they're suggested that they might be playing a role. Another thing that is interesting to note with regard to the Hutchison effect samples is, firstly, on many occasions, Hutchison observed fragmentation of metal samples. Aluminium was particularly susceptible. On examination of these fracture planes, transmutation of the aluminium was observed, and below is data presented in the Hutchison file. So I think this study was done in the 1980s. Here's the table. So this is the normal sort of piece of aluminium. There we go, aluminium, basically nothing else. And on the fracture planes, you see this aluminium and some iron here, a bit of manganese, and these high levels of copper. These transmutations have been observed in specific structures on MFMP Hutchison effect samples, as well as in other LENR systems. So the transmutation of aluminium here, aluminium to iron, is quite a common transmutation, it would seem. Moreover, testing of Hutchison effect samples in the 1980s in Germany showed not only had transmutation taken place, but the affected material continues to change. And so these are John's words in another article. He says, in Germany, I found the samples had been transmuted. They kept on changing their characteristics. And this has also been observed with some LENR research. So this observation here, and by other LENR researchers, is why it was suggested above in earlier part of this blog post that it may also occur in soil samples that have interacted with Hessdalen fireballs. So, for instance, the advanced or rapid transmutation of zirconium isotopes. MFMP testing of some Hutchison effect samples has revealed interesting isotopic anomalies in the product elements apparently formed during transmutation. This will be the subject of a future blog post, so you can look forward to that. Lastly, the Italian researchers include in Appendix 3 of their report an old hypothesis for the formation of the Hessdalen Lights. Lastly, the Italian researchers include in Appendix 3 of their report an old hypothesis for the formation of the Hessdalen Lights. Essentially, the idea is that it is due to a normally invisible mini black hole or something simulating it entering our atmosphere. Now, if we go to this, and essentially they're calling it an ergoplasma, a normally invisible mini black hole or something simulating it enters our atmosphere. Atmospheric gas is immediately trapped and heated, and it becomes a bright plasma. Magnetic lines of force, normally frozen in the atmospheric gas, are drastically amplified at the time of plasma collapse. So here we have a kind of black hole-like central force. This is the trapped plasma, and this is the cage-like magnetic field. They then say it may be due to an effect similar to a hypothesis put forward in 2000 for the formation of ball lightning. This is the Abrahamson-Dennis theory that we talked about in previous parts of this video series. A toroidal vortex of hot particles driven by extreme electric discharge from lightning. Now, to me, this sounds a little bit funny because an EVO is supposedly a toroidal vortex of electrons, like fluidized electrons, that are self-organizing, and it can take ions in there, and it would appear that it creates an analog black hole from what I've been looking at over the last couple of years. So what I'm suggesting is that the truth may lie somewhere in the middle, that actually the Abrahamson-Dennis theory may actually be reasonably accurate at describing the formation of a toroidal vortex of electrons and ions, but it's not just that there's burnable material in that toroidal vortex, that it actually creates an analog black hole, and then you get some other more interesting effects occurring. In conclusion, apparently natural atmospheric plasmatic ball observations yield data that is in line with multiple low-energy nuclear reaction systems observed by the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, suggesting that there is a link between the two. The possible relationship of mineral deposits local to daytime, non-lightning related fireball phenomena should be investigated. Ball lightning observations not due to lightning may become a method of discovering mineral deposits. So these anecdotes that Dr. George Egely catalogued over a couple of decades, but spanning anecdotes from like 100 years or whatever, if you looked at where these particular things were and looked at the geology, one might predict where there is certain minerals or elements in the ground. So it's actually actually taking serious ball lightning observations could be worth billions in terms of identifying mineral deposits. In this case, Hessdalen has this copper-rich area, so maybe there are copper-rich deposits in other areas where ball lightning has been observed. An attempt to see if there is any correlation between the observation rate and solar, magnetosphere, or cosmic phenomena should be considered. This is just talking back to the strange radiation potentially that's observed near the North Pole. So what I've done also at the end here is I've given links to Dr. Egely's first ball lightning study in the transfer problems, and I actually asked him on the 10th of January what was the weirdest thing he considered that ball lightning did. And he replied, "The most obvious is when it appears all of a sudden right in front of you without any apparent reason. There are hundreds of these cases. They violate the following laws: conservation of electric charge, conservation of energy, conservation of mass, conservation of linear and angular momentum, practically everything that is sacred in physics." And it's interesting that he said this because actually in the interview with Kenneth Shoulders between him and John Hutchison in 2010, there's an extra transcript here, and he says something very, very similar here. He says, "I measure the presence, if you will, measured in terms of total accumulated charge or total residual charge of this EVO. They vary. Well, nothing changes charge or mass, but these things do. That is so fundamentally opposed to all natural laws, natural meaning man-made, that we have written down, and it's outrageous. It's written in the law that says this: charge is conserved, mass is conserved, energy is conserved, E equals mc squared. They're all hitched together." Wrong. Just dead wrong. Because I can take one of these funny little particles and change its charge from actual measurement. This is no hand-waving thing. I can measure it with an instrument. I can do it any day you want to. You can change it 1,000,000,000 to 1 and still have it visible. The heck of it is, I can still keep reducing the charge to where it becomes an item that walks right through things. That's how John's earliest work seems to have things coming from the inside. He had been using this technique similar to what I use of injecting these chargeless particles into a core of material, the use of metal in John's case. He seemed to be fascinated with it. It doesn't much matter. Anything serves as a transport medium, if you will, for these things. Once they get in, they can transform themselves back into an energetic thing, just as mean and nasty as can be, by increasing the charge. And at that point, they come out mad, and they have. And so this is also talking to that point of these so-called micrometeorites that are found in, say, these calcium carbonate deposits in Australia, which were thought to be from the early part of the life of the Earth. And he's basically describing here how something can go black, it can go into another material, it doesn't matter what it is, and then they can become energetic again, and it would seem from our research that they can then transmute material, and calcium carbonate is able to produce the iron-rich spheres that were in there if this transmutation is indeed possible. I also include more recent sightings collected by John Abrahamson, and Pekka Junhunen talked of a similar observation at an impact crater in Finland. I want to thank especially Andrew Johnson for forwarding the initial information about the Hessdalen Lights. I want to ask just a couple of things. If you are one of the 82% of people that have not subscribed to our video channel, please subscribe, because there's going to be lots of really interesting videos and information coming up. And please hit the bell button for notifications. And if you can like this video, it really helps the algorithm get this information out to more people. The other thing is, if you find this work valuable and you want to see more of it, please consider donating. And there are links at the bottom of the blog post and in some of the videos. So thank you very much for your time, and I will see you soon.